My name is Lauren Peterson. I'm 33 years old, and the last thing my parents ever said to me before cutting me off was, "Don't show your face again." They said it with the kind of calm that hurts more than shouting. No tears, no hesitation, just a sentence that erased me from their lives like I was a mistake they were finally correcting. And yet, 3 years later, they were standing in the back row of a wedding venue in downtown Seattle, frozen in place, staring straight at me, the daughter they thought they'd erased, walking down the aisle in white. Their faces told me everything before a single word was spoken. Shock, fear, and something else I hadn't seen in them in a long time. Regret. But that moment didn't start at the wedding. It started years earlier, in my parents' living room, with a sentence that changed my life forever. Before I tell you how we got here, before I tell you why my parents warned me never to show my face again, let me ask you something. If your own family turned their backs on you, told you to disappear, would you still choose to rise, or would you shrink yourself to survive? If stories about family betrayal, emotional survival, and quiet revenge resonate with you, subscribe to the channel and stay with me, because this story gets deeper, darker, and more revealing than you might expect. The day my parents disowned me didn't look dramatic from the outside. No slammed doors, no screaming neighbors, just a quiet afternoon that smelled like coffee and disappointment. I remember sitting on the edge of the couch in their living room, my purse clutched in my lap like a life raft. My mother, Diane Peterson, stood by the window, arms crossed. My father, Richard, sat in his recliner, eyes fixed on the muted TV as if it mattered more than his daughter standing right in front of him. Between us stood my younger sister, Megan, golden child, favorite, the one who could do no wrong. I was there because Megan had called me earlier that day, her voice shaking, telling me Mom and Dad wanted a family conversation. Those words had always meant trouble. Still, I came. I always came. Family first. That was the rule, at least for me. "Lauren," my father finally said, turning down the TV, "we've decided this can't continue." My chest tightened. This. That vague word families use when they don't want to say your name out loud. "What can't continue?" I asked. My mother didn't turn around. "Your behavior." I almost laughed. I worked 2 jobs, paid my own rent, never asked them for money. I was the daughter who learned early to not need anyone. "My behavior?" I repeated. Megan sighed softly beside me, the way she always did when she wanted to look like the peacemaker. "You've just been difficult, Lauren." There it was, difficult. That word had followed me my entire life. When I asked why Megan got new clothes and I got hand-me-downs, when I questioned why her mistakes were forgiven while mine were remembered forever, when I dared to want something for myself. "What did I do this time?" I asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't make sense. My father finally looked at me. His eyes were cold. "You embarrassed this family." I felt like I'd been slapped. "How?" Megan's lips trembled softly. "You told Aunt Karen things that weren't your place to share." I turned to her. "You mean the truth?" Her eyes hardened for just a second, so quick my parents missed it. "You made me look bad." That was it. That was my crime. I told our aunt that Megan had borrowed money from our parents again, money they claimed they didn't have when I needed help after my car broke down. Somehow, that truth had turned into betrayal. My mother finally faced me. "We raised you better than this." "No," I said quietly, "you raised her better." The silence that followed was thick and dangerous. My father stood up slowly. "We are done being dragged into your negativity. If you can't respect this family, then don't be part of it." I stood there, stunned. "You're choosing her over me?" Megan let out a small sob, perfectly timed. "Why do you always make everything about you?" That's when my mother said it, the sentence that burned itself into my memory. "Don't show your face again, Lauren, until you learn how to be grateful." I waited for one of them to soften, to say they didn't mean it, to take it back. No one did. So I walked out. No dramatic goodbye, no slammed door, just the sound of my footsteps echoing down the driveway of the house I grew up in, the place that never truly felt like home. For weeks after that, I waited. I checked my phone constantly. I imagined my mom calling, saying things went too far. I imagined my dad texting something awkward but apologetic. Nothing came. Instead, Megan blocked me everywhere. That was the lowest point. The silence. The realization that I wasn't just unwanted, I was replaceable. I moved through life like a ghost after that. Work, home, sleep, repeat. I stopped going to family holidays, stopped explaining why I was alone. I told people my parents lived far away. It was easier than explaining they lived 10 miles from me and wanted nothing to do with me. But life has a way of changing when you least expect it. 6 months after being cut off, I met Ethan. It was at a bookstore cafe, the kind with mismatched chairs and burnt coffee. I was sitting alone, pretending to read, when he asked if the seat across from me was taken. I almost said yes out of habit. Instead, I said no. He listened, really listened. When I told him pieces of my story, he didn't rush to fix it or tell me family was everything. He just said, "That sounds incredibly painful." Those words cracked something open inside me. Over time, I told him more. About Megan, about my parents, about the warning to never show my face again. "Do you believe them?" he asked once. I shook my head. I believed them for a long time. He reached for my hand. "Then maybe it's time they see who you became without them." I didn't know then how literal those words would become, because when Ethan proposed, on a quiet evening with no audience, no drama, I said yes without thinking about my parents at all. Until the wedding invitations were printed. Until one name appeared on the guest list that I hadn't put there. I stared at the RSVP notification on my phone, my hands shaking as I read it again. Richard and Diane Peterson, attending. They were coming. After telling me never to show my face again, my parents were coming to my wedding. I reread the RSVP at least 10 times, hoping it would change, hoping I'd misunderstood, hoping it was some kind of mistake. But the names stayed the same. Richard and Diane Peterson, attending. No note, no apology, no explanation, just confirmation, like nothing had ever happened. My first reaction wasn't anger, it was fear. Fear has a way of creeping in quietly, reminding you of every version of yourself you worked so hard to outgrow. The insecure daughter, the one who tried too hard, the one who learned to stay small so others could stay comfortable. I showed Ethan the message, my voice barely steady. "They're coming." He didn't hesitate. "Do you want them there?" I thought about it, about the years of silence, about holidays spent pretending I was fine, about therapy sessions where I learned the difference between love and control. "No," I said finally, "but I don't want to hide either." He nodded, proud in a way that made my chest ache. "Then we don't change a thing." So we didn't. The weeks leading up to the wedding were strange. I kept expecting a call, some dramatic demand, some last-minute guilt trip. But my parents stayed silent, like they always did when silence hurt more. Megan, on the other hand, resurfaced. She messaged me 2 days before the wedding. "Did you really invite Mom and Dad?" I stared at the screen, my hands cold. "I didn't," I typed back, "but they're coming." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "They're only doing this for you," she finally wrote. "Don't make it awkward." I almost laughed. Awkward from the woman who helped erase me. I didn't reply. The morning of the wedding arrived, with soft lights and rain tapping gently against the hotel windows. The kind of rain that feels symbolic, like the world holding its breath. As my bridesmaids helped me into my dress, I caught my reflection in the mirror and barely recognized myself. Not because I looked different, but because I felt whole. I wasn't the girl begging to be chosen anymore. When the music began and the doors opened, I focused straight ahead. I didn't look for them. I didn't need to. But halfway down the aisle, I felt it. That familiar weight, that presence you recognize even without seeing it. I glanced to my left. There they were. My mother looked thinner, older, her eyes wide, lips parted slightly like she was seeing a ghost. My father stood rigid beside her, his jaw clenched, his expression unreadable. And between them, Megan. She wasn't smiling. For a moment, time slowed. Memories flooded back all at once. Birthdays where Megan blew out my candles by accident. Family dinners where my accomplishments were brushed aside. That living room, that sentence, "Don't show your face again." And yet, here I was. I didn't break eye contact. I didn't falter. I kept walking. Ethan squeezed my hands when I reached him, grounding me. When the officiant spoke about love and partnership, I heard every word. When Ethan said his vows, his voice steady and sure, I felt something settle deep inside me. This was my life now. After the ceremony, the reception buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses. I stayed close to friends who knew my story, people who didn't require explanations. I almost believed my parents would leave quietly, like spectators who realized they didn't belong. But, of course, they didn't. My mother approached first, alone. She stood in front of me, eyes glistening, hands clasped tightly like she was bracing herself. "Lauren," she said softly, like she hadn't shattered me years ago. "Mom," I replied, polite, distant. "You look beautiful," she added. "Thank you." An awkward pause stretched between us. I waited. She glanced around, lowering her voice. "We didn't think you'd do this so well." I felt the familiar sting, even now, surprised that I'd survived without them. "I did," I said simply. Her eyes filled with tears. "We were hurt." I almost lost my composure then. Hurt, as if hurt justified abandonment. "You told me not to show my face again," I reminded her, "so why are you here?" She hesitated. "Megan said you needed us." I froze. "What?" Before she could answer, Megan appeared beside her, eyes sharp. "Mom, don't." But it was too late. I turned to Megan. "What did you tell them?" She crossed her arms. "That you've been struggling, that this wedding was rushed, that Ethan pressured you." My heart pounded. "That's a lie." She shrugged. "They wouldn't have come otherwise." Everything clicked. The RSVP, the silence, the timing. This wasn't about reconciliation, it was about control. My father joined us then, his voice low. "We came to make sure you weren't making a mistake." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "You don't get to decide that anymore." His face darkened. "You wouldn't be here without us." "And yet," I said, my voice steady, "I am." Megan scoffed. "You always loved playing the victim." Something in me snapped, but not in the way it used to. There was no desperation, no need to prove myself. I loved being loved by people who didn't make it conditional. The room felt smaller. Guests nearby fell quiet, pretending not to listen. My mother reached for my arm. "We just want our family back." I gently stepped away. "You had a family. You chose not to be part of mine." Megan's face flushed. "You're really doing this? Embarrassing us?" I met her gaze, calm. "You did that yourself." She opened her mouth to respond, and that's when Ethan stepped in, placing himself beside me. "This conversation is over," he said firmly. "Lauren deserves peace today." For the first time, my parents saw it. Not the daughter they could silence, but the woman who'd chosen differently. Megan's eyes flashed with something dangerous. "You think you've won," she whispered, "but you don't know everything." My stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" She smiled, slow and cruel. "Ask Mom about the letter." I turned to my mother. "What letter?" Her face drained of color. And in that moment, I knew. The story I thought I understood was missing a devastating piece.
The word letter echoed in my head long after Megan said it. It followed me through the rest of the reception, through polite smiles and half-heard congratulations, through the way my hands shook as I held my champagne glass and tried not to let anyone notice. A letter. Not an email, not a text. A letter meant time, intention, paper folded and hidden, a secret that had waited patiently for the right moment to surface. I didn't confront my mother right away. I knew her too well. If I pushed too hard in public, she would retreat into tears and denial, and my father would step in to shut everything down. I'd learned that dance as a child. Say too much and the music stops. Instead, I waited. That night, after the last guests left and the venue lights dimmed, Ethan and I returned to our hotel suite. My dress hung loosely around me now, the adrenaline finally fading. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the carpet, replaying Megan's words over and over. Ask Mom about the letter. Ethan knelt in front of me. Talk to me. There's something they're hiding, I said quietly. Something big. He didn't question it. He never did when it came to my family. Do you want to call her? No, I said, shaking my head. If I do, she'll control the conversation. I need answers without manipulation. I barely slept that night. My dreams were filled with unopened envelopes and locked doors, my mother's voice calling my name but never answering my questions. The next morning, while Ethan showered, my phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Can we talk, please? I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Another part, the child still hoping, needed to know. Come by the house, she wrote. Just you. I felt my chest tighten. Their house. The same walls that had heard my laughter and my tears. The same living room where I'd been erased. Ethan wrapped a towel around his waist and read my face instantly. You don't have to go. I do, I said. This ends today. The drive to my parents' house felt longer than it used to. Every street triggered a memory. The park where Megan learned to ride a bike while I held the camera. The grocery store where my mother once scolded me for embarrassing her by crying in public. When I pulled into the driveway, Megan's car wasn't there. That alone told me something was different. My mother opened the door before I knocked. She looked smaller somehow, her shoulders slumped, eyes rimmed with red. Come in, she said softly. The house smelled the same, lemon cleaner and old wood. It made my throat ache. We sat at the kitchen table. No coffee this time, no pleasantries. You mentioned a letter, I said, getting straight to it. What letter? She folded her hands together, staring at them like they held the answer. Your sister shouldn't have said anything. So there is a letter. She closed her eyes. I felt anger rise, hot and sharp. Mom, I deserve the truth. Her voice trembled. It was from your grandmother. My heart skipped. Grandma Ruth? She nodded. I hadn't thought about my grandmother in years, not because I didn't love her, but because thinking about her hurt too much. She was the only one who ever noticed when Megan was favored, the only one who slipped me extra money and whispered, "You matter too." She wrote to you when she was sick. When? I asked. 3 years ago. The same year they cut me off. I stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. You're telling me my grandmother wrote me a letter and you never gave it to me? Tears streamed down her face now. She asked me not to. I laughed bitterly. That's a lie. She flinched. She said you were fragile. No, I snapped. You decided I didn't deserve it. Silence hung heavy between us. Where is it? I demanded. She hesitated. Where is it? She stood slowly and walked toward the hallway. Each step felt like a test of my restraint. She stopped at a small cabinet near the back door, opened a drawer, and pulled out an envelope, yellowed, creased, unopened. My name written in familiar cursive. Lauren Peterson. My knees went weak. She handed it to me like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I thought I was protecting you. I took it with shaking hands. You were protecting your version of this family. I didn't open it there. I couldn't. I tucked it into my bag like something sacred and turned to leave. "Lauren," she called after me, "your grandmother wanted peace." I paused at the door. "Then you should have honored her wishes." In the car, I sat for a long time before opening the letter. My hands trembled as I broke the seal, the paper crackling softly. "My sweet Lauren," it began. Tears blurred my vision instantly. She wrote about watching me grow quieter as Megan grew louder, about noticing the imbalance, the excuses, the way my parents leaned too heavily on me to be the strong one. She wrote about regret, hers for not speaking up more. Then came the line that made my breath hitch. "There is something you need to know about your childhood, something your parents will never tell you willingly." My heart pounded. She wrote about money, about a trust fund left in my name by my grandfather, meant for my education and future, about how it was reallocated to help Megan after a series of mistakes. "They will say it was for the family," she wrote, "but it was not theirs to take." I felt sick. Everything suddenly made sense. The favoritism, the resentment, the way Megan always landed on her feet. At the bottom of the page, my grandmother had written one final sentence. "If you are reading this, it means you are stronger than they ever believed, and stronger than I was brave enough to be." I dropped the letter into my lap and sobbed, not just for the money, but for the truth, for the years stolen, for the version of myself that always wondered why I wasn't enough. My phone buzzed again. A message from Megan. "So you found it. Now you know why they'll never choose you." I stared at the screen, tears drying, something harder forming in my chest. She was wrong. They hadn't chosen me, but I was done waiting, and Megan had no idea what she just awakened.
I didn't go home after reading the letter. I couldn't. The walls of our apartment felt too quiet, too safe for the storm building inside me. Instead, I drove aimlessly through the city, the letter folded neatly in my bag like proof of a life I'd been denied. Megan's text replayed in my head. "Now you know why they'll never choose you." For the first time, instead of breaking me, her words sharpened something inside me. I called Ethan and told him everything about the letter, the trust fund, the lies. He listened without interrupting, without minimizing, without telling me to calm down. "What do you want to do?" he asked when I finished. "I want the truth," I said, "from all of them." That evening, I sent one message, a group text. "We need to talk, tonight." They didn't reply, but they showed up. My parents' living room felt smaller with all of us in it. My father stood near the fireplace, arms crossed. My mother sat rigid on the couch. Megan leaned against the wall, her expression unreadable, almost smug. I placed the letter on the coffee table between us. "Explain," I said. My father glanced at it and sighed, already irritated. "Your grandmother always had a way of stirring things up." "That's not an answer," I replied. Megan laughed softly. "You're really going to do this now?" "Yes," I said, meeting her eyes. "I am." My father straightened. The money was used for the family. Megan needed help. And I didn't? My voice stayed calm, surprising even me. "You were stronger," my mother whispered. That sentence hit harder than any insult. "So you punished me for surviving," I said. Megan stepped forward. "You didn't lose anything. You still had opportunities." "Because I worked for them," I shot back. "Because I didn't have a safety net." My father's jaw tightened. "This conversation is over." "No," I said firmly. "It ends when you tell the truth." Silence fell. Finally, my mother spoke. "We thought it was temporary, that we'd make it up to you." "You never did," I said. "Instead, you erased me." Megan rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic." That's when something inside me settled completely. "I'm done," I said. Not angry, not begging, just done. I stood, picking up the letter. "You don't get access to my life anymore. Not my marriage, not my future." My father scoffed. "You think you can just walk away?" I looked at him, truly looked at him, and smiled sadly. I already did. I left without another word. Outside, the air felt lighter, like I'd set something down I'd been carrying my whole life. That night, Ethan held me as I cried, not because I was broken, but because I was finally free. Healing didn't come all at once. It came in boundaries, in therapy sessions where I learned that love doesn't demand silence, in mornings where I woke up without checking my phone for their approval. My parents tried reaching out months later. Megan never apologized. I didn't respond. Some people don't change, but some of us grow anyway. On our first anniversary, Ethan asked if I regretted anything. I thought about the wedding, about seeing their faces when they realized I hadn't disappeared. No, I said. I showed my face and I found my voice.
Cutting them off didn't bring instant peace. Anyone who tells you that walking away from family feels clean and easy is lying. What it brought first was quiet, and quiet has a way of amplifying everything you've tried not to feel. For weeks after the confrontation, I moved through life like I was underwater. I laughed at the right moments, went to work, cooked dinner with Ethan, answered messages from friends. On the outside, I looked fine. On the inside, my mind kept replaying old scenes, now colored with truth. Every time Megan had cried and my parents rushed to her side, every time I was told, "You'll understand when you're older," every time I doubted myself instead of them. Knowing about the trust fund didn't just hurt because of the money, it hurt because it proved something I'd always suspected but never allowed myself to believe. My pain had been convenient for them. I started therapy again, this time not to fix myself, but to untangle years of quiet manipulation. My therapist asked me a question that stuck with me. Who benefited most from you staying silent? The answer came immediately. Megan. Silence had been the currency of our family, and I'd paid the highest price. About 2 months after the wedding, my father showed up at my office. I was in the middle of a meeting when the receptionist messaged me. "There's a man here asking for you, says it's urgent." I knew before I even stood up. He was waiting in the lobby, hands clasped behind his back like he was inspecting the place. Seeing him there, uninvited, unannounced, sent a sharp jolt through my chest. "Lauren," he said, nodding like this was normal. "This isn't appropriate," I replied, keeping my voice low. "You can't just come here." "We need to talk," he said. "Man to—" He stopped himself. "Adult to adult." I almost laughed at the irony. We stepped outside. The city noise buzzed around us, grounding me. "You embarrassed this family," he said without preamble. I stared at him. "You came here to say that? You aired private matters, your grandmother's letter. Do you mean the truth?" He clenched his jaw. "That money kept your sister afloat and pushed me under," I said calmly. He sighed, like I was a stubborn child. "Megan is struggling again." There it was. "What does that have to do with me?" I asked. "She's going through a separation," he said. "She needs support." I waited. "We thought," he continued carefully, "that maybe you could help smooth things over, show some understanding." Understanding. The word tasted bitter. "You want me to fix her life after you ruined mine. That's not fair." "No," I replied evenly. "What you did wasn't fair. This is just the consequence." His eyes hardened. "You're being selfish." I smiled then, small but genuine. "That's what you call it when I finally choose myself." He left without another word, but his visit shook me more than I expected. Not because I doubted my decision, but because it confirmed something painful. They didn't miss me. They missed what I provided. That night, Megan called. I almost didn't answer. Almost, but something told me this call mattered. Her voice sounded different, tired, stripped of its usual confidence. "So," she said, "you really cut us off." "I cut you off years ago," I replied. She scoffed weakly. "You always rewrite things." "Why are you calling?" I asked. There was a pause. "Dad told you, didn't he?" "About your separation?" "Yes."
Her voice cracked. "You don't know how hard this is." I closed my eyes. For a split second, the old instinct kicked in, the urge to comfort, to fix, to sacrifice. Then I remembered the letter. I know what it's like to be alone. I just didn't have parents cushioning my fall. "That's not my fault," she snapped. "No," I agreed, "but what you did after was." Silence stretched between us. "You think you're better than us now," she said quietly. "No," I replied. "I'm thinking I'm done competing." She exhaled sharply. "You always wanted what I had." The words stunned me. "No," I said slowly. "I wanted what you took." Her breathing quickened. "You're really going to hold this over me forever?" "I'm not holding anything. I'm letting go." Her voice hardened again, defensive armor snapping back into place. "Then don't come crying when you need us." I almost smiled. I already learned how not to. I hung up before she could respond. For the first time, I felt something close to peace. But peace has a way of attracting storms. 2 weeks later, a certified letter arrived at our apartment. From a lawyer. My hands shook as I opened it. Petition to settle disputed family assets. They weren't done. They were trying to rewrite the past, this time legally. And suddenly, the truth wasn't just emotional anymore. It was a battlefield.
The lawyer's letter sat on our kitchen counter for 3 days before I touched it again. Not because I didn't understand what it meant, but because I understood it too well. They weren't coming for reconciliation. They were coming for control. Ethan watched me carefully as I reread the words for the 5th time. Disputed family assets. Such a clean phrase for something so ugly. "They're scared," he said finally. "Of what?" I asked. "Of you not staying quiet." That night, I contacted a lawyer of my own, a woman named Marianne Cole, sharp-eyed, calm, and unimpressed by emotional theatrics. When I showed her my grandmother's letter, she read it twice, slowly. "This changes things," she said. My heart pounded. "How?" "It proves intent," she replied, "and concealment." For the first time since this all began, I felt something unexpected. Leverage. The legal process moved slowly, but the emotional fallout didn't. My parents stopped pretending this was about peace. Their messages became colder, shorter, formal. Megan, on the other hand, went silent. Too silent. That's how I knew she was planning something. The call came from an unknown number late one afternoon. "Lauren," a familiar voice said. My stomach dropped. "Megan." "I need to see you," she said quickly. "Alone." "No," I replied without hesitation. "Please," she insisted. "This isn't what you think." I almost laughed. "That's what you always say." There was a pause, then her voice softened in a way that sent chills down my spine. "I found something Mom and Dad never told either of us." Against my better judgment, curiosity stirred. "What?" I asked. "A second letter," she said, "from Grandma." My grip tightened on the phone. "You're lying." "I'm not," she said, "and if you don't meet me, they'll destroy it." My lawyer would have told me not to go. Ethan would have begged me not to. But some part of me needed to see this through to the end. We met at a quiet cafe halfway between our homes. Megan looked smaller than I remembered, tired. Her confidence cracked around the edges. She slid an envelope across the table. This one was addressed to both of us. I found it hidden in Dad's office after the wedding. I stared at it, my chest tight. "Why are you telling me now?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Because I didn't know the full truth, and because I'm scared." I opened the letter. My grandmother had written about guilt, about watching Megan struggle with insecurity and entitlement, and watching my parents compensate instead of correct, about trying, unsuccessfully, to intervene. Then came the line that made my breath catch. "If you are reading this together, it means you still have a chance to choose honesty over inheritance." I looked up at Megan. "Did you know?" She shook her head, tears spilling. "Not about the trust.
not about how much they took. For the first time in my life, she looked human. They pitted us against each other, I said quietly. She nodded, and I let them. Silence settled between us, heavy but different. I don't expect forgiveness, she whispered, but I don't want to be like them anymore. I studied her face, searching for manipulation, for calculation. All I saw was fear. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A message from my father. If you and your sister are conspiring against us, understand this will have consequences. I showed Megan. Her face hardened. They're panicking. That's when it happened. She leaned forward and said the words that changed everything. There's more money. I blinked. What? They moved it offshore years ago, under my name. My pulse roared in my ears. You knew this? I found out last year, she admitted. They said it was to protect the family. And you believed them, I said. Her voice broke. I wanted to. Rage surged through me, not just at her, but at the system that rewarded her compliance and punished my independence. They're using you, I said. I know, she replied. That's why I'm here. For the first time, the dynamic shifted, not sisters competing, but two women standing at the edge of a truth too big to ignore. Are you willing to testify? I asked her quietly. She froze. Against them, I clarified. Her hands trembled. They'll cut me off. I thought about the years I already lost, the silence, the exile. They already did, I said gently, just not in the same way. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply. When she opened them, there was resolve there. Yes, she said, I am. We didn't hug, we didn't cry together, but when we stood up, something irreversible had happened. The story my parents built on lies was starting to collapse, and they were about to realize the daughter they silenced and the one they favored were no longer under their control. The courtroom didn't look like I imagined it would. I expected something dramatic. Dark wood, sharp echoes, maybe the kind of tension you see in movies. Instead, it was almost ordinary. Beige walls, fluorescent lights, a quiet hum of paperwork and whispered conversations. And yet, this room held the power to rewrite my entire life. I sat beside my lawyer, hands folded tightly in my lap, my wedding ring cool against my skin. Ethan sat behind me, close enough that I could feel his presence even without turning around. That alone steadied me. Across the room, my parents sat together. My mother clutched her purse like a shield. My father's posture was stiff, defensive. They hadn't looked at me once since arriving. Megan sat 2 rows behind them, alone. That single detail told me everything. Whatever pressure they'd tried to apply, whatever threats they'd made, it hadn't worked. The judge entered. Everyone stood. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure others could hear it. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about truth. As proceedings began, my parents' lawyer painted a familiar picture. A family that had done its best. A daughter who had misunderstood sacrifices. A granddaughter whose letter was emotionally charged but legally ambiguous. I listened without reacting. Years ago, those words would have broken me. Now they sounded hollow. Then my lawyer stood. She spoke calmly, methodically, laying out timelines, bank records, and finally my grandmother's letters. Not just one, both. When the second letter was introduced into evidence, I saw my mother's shoulders sag. My father's face tightened. Megan was called to testify. My breath caught as she walked to the stand. She looked small in the oversized chair, but her voice didn't waver when she spoke. She told the truth, about the trust fund, about how it was moved, about how our parents framed it as protection, about how they discouraged her from ever telling me. I thought staying quiet was loyalty, she said, her eyes flicking briefly toward me. Now I know it was fear. The courtroom was silent. My father shook his head slowly, as if denying reality could still save him. When I was called next, my legs felt weak, but my voice didn't. I talked about growing up feeling invisible, about being told I was strong when what they really meant was expendable, about the day they told me not to show my face again, and how I believed them. I didn't cry. I didn't need to, because for the first time, someone was listening. When it was over, the judge recessed to review everything. We waited. Minutes felt like hours. My mother finally looked at me then, really looked at me. Her eyes were red, her expression unfamiliar, uncertain. "Lauren," she whispered across the aisle. I didn't respond, not out of cruelty, but out of clarity. Some conversations come too late. The judge returned. The ruling wasn't dramatic. It didn't come with applause or gasps, just words. Clear, firm. The trust had been misappropriated. Assets would be redistributed. Legal consequences would follow. My parents' story, so carefully curated for decades, collapsed in a matter of minutes. As people stood and began to leave, my father remained seated, staring straight ahead. My mother cried quietly into her hands. Megan stood near me, unsure. "I'm sorry," she said softly. I nodded. "I know." It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was something honest. Outside the courthouse, the air felt different, lighter, like the end of a long storm. Ethan wrapped an arm around me. "You did it." I shook my head. "No, I survived it." As we walked away, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because I'd won, but because I'd finally told the truth out loud. Leaving the courthouse that day, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because I had won in a legal sense, but because the truth was finally out. My parents' carefully constructed walls of lies had crumbled. Megan had testified honestly. I had spoken my truth aloud. And for the first time, I didn't feel trapped by their expectations or their manipulations. Ethan held my hand as we stepped into the afternoon sunlight. His presence grounded me, reminding me that love could be steady, kind, and unconditionally supportive. I realized that the life I wanted, one defined by honesty, peace, and choice, was finally mine to shape. Megan fell silent beside me. Her usual sharpness was gone, replaced with something vulnerable, almost human. "I'm sorry, Lauren," she said quietly, "for everything." I didn't know what to say. For years, I'd wanted revenge, recognition, answers. Now, standing beside the sister I never thought I'd truly understand, I only felt clarity. "I know," I said simply. That was all that needed to be said. Forgiveness wasn't required. Recognition wasn't required. Truth was enough. The weeks after the ruling were surreal. My parents tried calling, texting, emailing, but I didn't respond. I realized that closure doesn't always come from reconciliation. Sometimes it comes from simply stepping into a life where toxic people no longer have influence over your happiness. Ethan and I returned home, resuming our ordinary life, but ordinary felt extraordinary. We laughed freely, cooked meals without tension, and made plans for a future built on respect and love rather than fear and expectation. I no longer tiptoed around someone else's judgment or approval. I was free to be fully myself. I also learned the most difficult but important lesson. Boundaries are acts of love, love for yourself. Walking away from people who betrayed me wasn't cruel, it was necessary. I didn't have to forgive them on their terms. I didn't have to remain silent, and I certainly didn't have to accept manipulation in any form. I began therapy again, not to heal from the past, but to strengthen my present and future. I learned to love myself, to value my voice, and to trust my instincts. Every choice I made, whether to engage with Megan cautiously, refuse contact with my parents, or protect my own financial independence, was a declaration that I would never allow anyone else to dictate my worth again. Months later, I visited my grandmother's grave. I knelt there, holding both letters she left for me, and whispered all the things I wished I could have told her when she was alive. I survived. I spoke my truth. I chose myself. I left a single rose, walking away lighter than I'd ever felt. I didn't need to cry, and I didn't need to look back. Peace wasn't about erasing the past, it was about refusing to let it control me anymore. Megan and I spoke occasionally after that. Not often, but honestly. We didn't rebuild the sisterhood of my childhood, but we rebuilt honesty. And for the first time, I felt that even though our past was messy, our present could be clear. Now, on quiet mornings, I sit with Ethan, sipping coffee, planning our future. I smile, thinking of how far I've come, from the girl who was told not to show her face again to the woman who walks confidently in her own life, voice intact, boundaries set, and heart healed. Some people don't change. Some betray, manipulate, and abandon. But the ones who survive, who stand up for themselves, who claim their truth, they thrive. And sometimes thriving is the sweetest revenge. Have you ever been silenced or betrayed by someone you loved? How did you find the strength to reclaim your life? Share your story in the comments. I want to hear it.